Hey everybody, this is Chris Wall. I am the executive producer and showrunner of the Wingfeather Saga animated series. Thank you for joining us for the summer read and watch series. I am joined by a couple special guests. And first, I'm going to ask my friend Andrew over here, would you mind telling us who this young man is over on my left?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Cooper Shue. Cooper is a performer, author, and Wingfeather superfan. Cooper has read more than 200 chapter books over the past year and has a reputation for telling jokes that make people laugh out loud, as opposed to just laughing in their hearts.
Andrew Peterson is a singer-songwriter, author, and founder of The Rabbit Room. Andrew has released more than 10 records over the past 20 years. His books include the 4 volumes of the award-winning Wingfeather Saga, which have sold more than 1 million copies.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to spend some time this summer going through the amazing Wingfeather Saga books. I had the great pleasure of reading these when they were first published back in 2008. When did you first read them? Do you remember how long ago it was?
I don't know exactly, but I think I started when I was 6 or 7. Okay. I'm 10 now, by the way.
And we're going to challenge you at home to read along in the books and then maybe watch the episodes. And what we're going to do in our time together is talk about some things that maybe are different between the two. So that'll be kind of fun. At the end of this, we have a really fun giveaway that you can be eligible for. So at the end of our run of the Read and Watch campaign, there will be a special link that has a test. And if you pass the test, answering a couple questions about the summer reading, then you're eligible for a drawing to win some figurines.
Come see me and I'll give you the answers.
If you need help, Cooper, he's your guy. All right, there it is. Well, let's start with some questions.
What you got, Cooper?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the show. The Toothy Cow chase. That wasn't in the books. What changed with that? Why was that in the show?
Okay, why was the Toothy Cow there at the top? I would say, I think we're looking for a good opening that was more interesting probably than the opening in the books. Maybe not more interesting, but for a TV show, you want to kind of come out with a bang.
Yeah, and I think that, Cooper, when you're wanting to meet new characters, and we talk about this in television film, this idea of saving the cat. So there's a moment in every TV show or movie that you watch in which the hero, the lead person, does something that you just love. They save the cat, right? From a tree, right? They do something, you're like, I like that
this guy.
person. And I want to see them succeed. I want to see them go out in the world and do good things. So you have to have that happen fairly early in a story for you to go, oh, I love it. Now, sometimes in a book, the author can just tell you about that person, and you go, I love them. They're great. In a show, they have to do something on screen that you see, right? Like, I can just tell you, hey guys, Cooper is a great kid. He loves reading books. He's also really funny and charming. So I've just told them about you. But instead, what we've been doing is they've been just meeting you while you hang out and chat with us. Right? So the Toothy Cow scene was a way for us to meet the kids, our lead guys, Janner and Tink, in a way that they're doing something, right? While we get to know them a little bit. And I think we imagined that probably happened fairly frequently.
Yeah. And I just think it was a pretty smart way of introducing the characters. Because if you remember, Janner's in the tree. What is he doing when he's in the tree?
He's reading Pembroke's Creature.
He's reading Pembroke's Creature. What is Kalmar doing? What is Tink doing while he's doing that?
He's doing archery and he
kind of gets into trouble, right?
Exactly. He's definitely
so in those two little scenes, you know a whole lot about Janner and a whole lot about Cal, right? Without anybody having to.
It also was a way for us to cheat the idea that Kalmar knew how to run a bow and arrow, because in the television show they go from no weapons whatsoever to shooting things and fighting fangs pretty fast.
Fair.
And I wanted to believe that secretly they were both working on a little bit of their skills, so that they couldn't just go from, I don't know how to use a bow and arrow, to, they're like Legolas all of a sudden.
True, there's that training montage in season 2, episode 1.
Yep, that was another way, yeah.
Yep.
Next, there's the fangs on the porch. Slarb and I think Brack, right?
Correct,
They're
Brack.
going to get that hoe back from that. Why did you introduce Slarb like that instead of in the alley scene?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I wanted Slarb to be able to find his way home, of course.
I'm just amazed at these questions. I'm just kind of like, why did we do that?
I wanted Slarb to know where they lived, because it makes him a bigger threat to them. like he could go to their house. I remember in the books feeling that, like when that first attack happens, they're totally going to come to their house. They're going to find him. Now in the books, of course, that all happens very differently. He captures them right there, right, and takes them to jail. So we should talk about that. Can we talk about that? Let's talk about jail. Can we talk about Fang Jail? Fang Jail.
Yeah, and why they didn't go to jail.
So Fang Jail is a funny thing. What I felt like is I couldn't put the kids and the family in jail too many times. It draws way too much attention to them, to the Fangs, right? So Nia's job has been look down, don't look them in the eyes, kind of don't pay attention to the Fangs at all. And so I felt like if they got all the way to jail, that makes them kind of prime suspect for anything fishy that happens in the world, right? Like if they're like looking for something, well, that family clearly is interesting, different than the other. You know what I mean? It's like having a rap sheet, you know?
Unless families are getting arrested all the time.
Sure, yeah.
Which is what was happening in the books.
In the books, it was much more regular.
Saying.
So if you start building out the norms arresting people and they're putting people in jail all the time, you could.
But then we didn't have time to establish
that screen time. Then I'm using how much of an episode do you want to learn about families being thrown into jail, right? And so I think if you're loaded up with too much stuff, it felt like the jail was one we could just reduce and save it and use it once.
In the books, it was only a brief mention of Sarah being taken. She didn't even live in Glipwood. How come there was that change? Or even in a way more to the point, why did Andrew write Sarah as a minor character in that first book and then expand upon her later in the series?
I love this question so much. And also you're very articulate and it's impressive. The Sarah Cobbler was a total surprise to me because I had written the whole book and there was no mention of Sarah Cobbler, the book one. And my editor, Jeanette at Waterbrook, when she read the first book, she said she really felt like that opening scene where Janner's lying in bed and he can hear the black carriage coming and he's got the carriage comes, the carriage black is bouncing around in his head. She was just like, yeah, it just feels kind of abstract. I almost wish that, there could be like a kid maybe that Janner knew who had gotten taken. So in the second or third draft of the book, I just kind of added a sentence that said, Janner remembered a girl named Sarah Cobbler who'd been taken. And by the time I got to book 2, I couldn't stop thinking about who Sarah Cobbler was and what her story was. And so I had him bump into her in the Fork Factory. So it was like almost an afterthought that was a seed that got planted that turned into one of my favorite characters.
I think for us in the series side with Sarah, it came down to in episode 3, so that's mid-season.
Yeah.
Right? So we got 6 episodes. So middle of the season, we needed something to happen that would kind of push Janner out and have him take action. Right? That he'd been kind of the story had been happening to him and we needed him to go take. So what could we use to motivate Janner to want something? So we talk about it in all stories. What does the character want? Like, what's the thing that they want that you can clearly put out there? So when you were reading Wingfeather early, did you know exactly what Janner wanted?
No, not exactly.
Yeah, it's a little diffuse. Later, it becomes really sharp. But early on, it's not really clear yet. And so we needed to sharpen that up. And so we thought...
So we wrote an I Want song.
I want Sarah. So we thought, what if he wants his friend back? Because I loved that reference in the book. I was like, what if he wants this person back? What if so then we need to establish her. So that was how Sarah's storyline came in. Hey, so here's a question for you, sir. What was your favorite part of episode 1, which is technically chapters 1 through 14 of the book? What was your favorite part?
I think that maybe my favorite part was in Books and Crannies. Oscar's just always been my favorite character, and I kind of like the development with Zuzab because we know from book 2, Ridge Runners like fruit. We know it from the footnotes. Mobrick likes fruit, but we just didn't really established that a whole lot in the books with Zuzab. Like, it wasn't like he was always hunting for fruit. And there was no real close bond with Tink and Zuzab, so it didn't mean quite as much when Zuzab did this kind of surprising thing.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
In the footnotes of chapter 12, we learn about ships and sharks, a yard game that the children play. It's mentioned in the jail, but then it's never explained.
Remember, ships and sharks.
There's always a way out.
It's true.
Yeah. Like, is the question, why isn't it explained in the show?
Why did we mention it and then not explain? I don't remember why. I know.
I don't know.
Because they do it in the jail, they talk about it, but it was in these first chapters of the book.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me when stuff like that goes unexplained in a TV show. It just adds to the depth of the world. People mention stuff in passing that we don't bother to explain. It just means the world is bigger than,
And then the last one comment here from episode 1, I thought this was a really good one. In the series, Tink is portrayed as outgoing, adventurous, energetic. In the books, he starts off a bit more timid, being afraid of heights in the first few chapters. Discuss that change. I know we talked at length about this one. I'm sure you noticed it, but about kind of adjusting the dials there a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, it was just my first book. There's some things that I wanted that if I could revise it easily, I would revise.
But
So-
you talked at length about with Tink, you wanted to be afraid of heights so that when he went along Glipper Trail, you
Right,
could
but-
use that moment to drive him.
Exactly.
So it wasn't careless. It was like
No,
to do a
it was
certain
very much
outcome.
on purpose, but then it became cumbersome to try to have Tink be afraid of heights in every situation where he was up high.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not going to work because they're like running along the cliffs and he's climbing through trees.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that was the thing that I wish I could go back and take out.
I've got one final question.
One final
before we
question, and then
move
we're going
on
to wrap
the
up
book.
episode 1 of our Read and Watch here.
Armelin the Bard. There's this whole scene with Armelin and the kids in the books, and Nia kind of pulls them away, kind of giving some suspicions away. There's a talk between Armelin and Lily, but Lily doesn't give as much away, so it's harder for Armelin to realize. And there just isn't that scene where Nia's like trying to keep the subject of Anira and all that stuff away from the kids. What changed with that?
Yeah.
These are really good questions.
Really good questions. I honestly can't.
I mean, I
give a
think
way to answer.
thematically, we wanted Nia to always be like, nobody pay attention to my kids.
But there is in the books. Are you thinking about the scene after Nia gets the boys out of jail?
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying,
walking 'em
remember,
home.
Nia covers Lily's hand in the show. Why don't, as they go back, run into Armelin, and that be the scene between them? The same thing could happen. It might not have quite as much of an oomph, but it could still be something, and it could still add some stuff to it.
No, it's a good point. I think a lot of these things that happened just because it's just 22 minutes, and we've just got a small amount of time to convey a whole lot of information. So we'd find ways to streamline it. I mean, I do love that moment in the book because I was trying to drop a hint that Armelin, whose whole game is about singing about the Isle of Anira, the Shining Isle, is the one who would see this family and think, could this be them? No. You know what I mean?
But he'd be the one.
Yeah, he would be the guy to
Definitely
notice
that
it. And that she would know that he would be the guy, and so she was freaked out and tried to bustle him away. But that's just a lot of subtlety that's hard to convey in a show in a short amount of time.
I liked in this episode having Armelin with Oscar and Farinia.
Oh yeah, were they talking about the rebellion?
Right,
yeah.
and let you think about what were they talking about. So like putting the three of them together was more interesting for me as just a passive thing, like, wonder what they're working on.
Yep.
Probably some stuff.
Oh yeah, by the way, speaking of Farinia, I kind of have a question about that, but I feel like it could work if we move on to episode 2 now and start
Great
talking
idea.
about that, since
call.
so I have some other
That'll
questions
be on
about
episode
that.
2.
And
Okay.
this is a great transfer.
Thank you for joining us for episode 1, Read and Watch. Glad we could introduce you to these fine folks here, and we're going to keep going. And join us again for the next time we sit here and chat about episode 2 and
Which covers chapters what?
chapters. What is it? I have my notes here.
Chapters
I think
15
maybe-
to 19.
15 to 19. So go read those, watch the episode, and then we'll talk about some differences between those two.
And Cooper will ask us questions we don't know how to answer.
It's going to keep happening.
It's true.
All right. See you next time.